New to this version is also some slight changes to the way that the top bar formatting for Snap is associated. If we look in this area, we see that there's now a top bar label for Snap in addition to a new lock icon, which I'll be going over more in depth. If we were to press F4 and bring up our preferences, we can actually go into the Boxcutter preferences, and underneath display there's an option for the snap label in case you want to get rid of the snap label and have it look like it did traditionally. However, with it on, you at least are aware of the state of snapping in Boxcutter at its present time. So whenever you first enable snap, we see that it says dots, which means that by holding control and hovering over the surface, we see that snap dots are appearing, which I'll be going over more in depth later. If we click the icon next to it, we see that grid is enabled, where we can see the new grid in action. And by holding control, we can see that we're able to actively scan the surface and ray trace on it, looking for that perfect angle to work off of for us to begin our cut. However, this icon at the end is a new one, which is Increment Lock, which is soon to become Snap Lock. And basically what this means is that by tapping control, you can start a grid snapping, but you don't no longer have to hold control the entire time. So this was something that we've been working on improving, and over time it should be getting even better than it is in its current form. But we just wanted to take some steps to making these options a little more focal for users. Whenever you're in grid lock mode, you can press escape to remove the grid off screen, and by just unchecking that, we can go back to working the way that we were previously. So really that's all there is when it comes to the top bar changes when it comes to snap in the top bar. However, if we open a button or bring the drop down out for snap, we see that there's also been some option changes here. For the most part, increment snap hasn't changed, and neither has the enabling of snap grid to allow us to go in and choose how much we want to snap. You'll see that also static now has parameters for both grid and dots. So static grid and dots are two systems that we've been working on as kind of a backup in the event of failure, and now they finally have a dedicated location where users can toggle these behaviors off and on the fly, which I'll be going over more in depth. Rotation angle is still where it was, which is basically the amount of rotation that happens when you press R, but also notice that there's now a fade timing system set up for dots. So right now I have mine set to 50, which means that it takes about 50 milliseconds to come in, but it takes about 1200 in order to leave. And we can actually lower this down to something like 50, and dots behave like they would traditionally, where the moment you release control they actually disappear. But there's just something about seeing them last around for a moment and fade out gently that just touches a groove with me. So another thing is whenever grid's enabled, grid also has fade capabilities as well. So right now we see that the grid comes in at the speed of light. However, it leaves after about 6 milliseconds or 60 milliseconds. Let's actually raise this to 1200 as well. And now we see that I'm able to just drop grids repeatedly, and they just fade out one by one. But we'll be going over that in this more dedicated section. But just letting you know that we've taken some steps towards streamlining the snap area, and you'll see it continuously get better over the next versions, but it is something that we're working on in the background.